Okay, in this next section we're going to begin talking about tools and materials, and I'm going to begin by showing you some things that you'll use doing stained glass that you can purchase either at your corner store or you might even have them laying around the house. This is done to save you a little bit of money, because usually if you have to buy these things at the stained glass place, they have to charge you a little bit more. Okay, camera girl. Okay, one of the things for making patterns is just to get some cardstock. You can buy this at a print shop or your store. It's just like type paper, only it's a little bit thicker. Butcher paper, also for making patterns. And this you can use for making bigger things. You can buy it by the foot. Usually about an 8-foot piece is plenty for making most patterns. Steel wool. This particular type of steel wool you can buy in bigger portions at the hardware store. This is very fine steel wool. It's called 4/0 steel wool, which means that when you buy the package you'll look and you'll see 4 zeros on it, meaning that it's very fine. If you use anything heavier, like even an SOS pad, you'll end up scratching your project. Simple tools that you might want for making patterns. Of course you'd use a square if you're going to make a big rectangular pattern. So if you have that out in your garage, hang on to it. Just a simple pair of scissors, a necessary item in making stained glass for cutting patterns. Keep things around like just some rags and stuff for cleaning. I have one glove, not that I'm Michael Jackson, but this one glove is used to put on so that I can hold a piece of stained glass and solder the edges, and if it drips it's not going to burn my hand. A baby jar. I'll show you why that comes in handy later, but just to tell you really quick, I use this to put flux in, and the flux that we're going to use is very fine, almost like water. This keeps you from spilling a whole jar of flux if you accidentally bump it. Tape measures, yardsticks, rulers, even pieces of it. These are used not only to measure but also to use as blocking for larger pieces. Can you see that, camera girl? Like you'll put a piece of glass in there and block it in with pins and stuff. I'll talk about that later as we get there. You'll need something if you're going to do frames, and we probably won't talk anything about frames in this DVD, but a hacksaw is one thing to cut them with, or if you have a power bandsaw that will cut metal, that's good. Sharpies. You need these for marking the glass as we get going on, and I like to use black and silver. Black for marking lighter glass, silver for marking darker glass. Of course, to make patterns you just need pencils. Number 2s are good. This is carbon paper. For making sun catchers, just the normal 1-page size sheets work really good, and you can reuse them several times since you don't draw the same lines for every sun catcher. It looks to me like this one's been used about 20 times. If you can find it, buy a larger piece of carbon paper. If not, you may have to wait and buy one like this from your stained glass company. But again, one piece goes a long way. This has been used for practically all of those panels that I showed you. Some of you are prone to get cuts, and just as a warning, if you work a lot with glass, eventually you're going to get some little cuts. But to help cut down on those, if you're real sensitive to that, buy yourself just some rubber gloves to help you work with the glass. You even get a thicker gauge if you need to. For my smaller panels, I bought a smaller square. I think I bought this at the dollar store. And lastly, paper clips. I use them to bend to make stars for my Christmas trees. I also use them on frames. Let me grab one really quick. Here's that hummingbird frame that I showed you, and the clips on the end are just simply made from paper clips. Get the heavy duty kind. Okay, some more things that we can scrounge. You'll want to get you some safety glasses, especially for when we get to the part where we're going to grind glass. You don't want any of that flipping up into your eye. A pair of plain needle nose pliers comes in very handy. You can buy some rubber cement just about anywhere. You'll need a bottle of that. And if you can find one, just a little art knife or an X-Acto knife with a pointed blade on it. Okay, the most expensive thing that you're probably going to buy is a grinder. This is one of the least expensive ones, and I've made almost all of my projects on this grinder. And it comes so that the top will come off, and there's a wheel in the middle. The one that it comes with is a much smaller wheel, but you can remove the center portion and put it in the bigger one. This is called a hummingbird grinder, and it does the job. You can spend more on a grinder if you want to, but that's up to you. Okay, the next most important thing probably would be your soldering equipment, and that includes a soldering iron. Again, prices vary. This is one of the least expensive ones. This is the second one I've been through, and what happens with when these burn out, I just throw it away and buy a new one. And along with the soldering iron, you should have a stand. The soldering iron sits in it like so, and that allows you to set it down when you're not working. And in the bottom of that stand, you'll see there's a little sponge, and you'll need that to help keep the tip of your soldering iron clean. Along with the soldering iron, you can't just plug it in and start using it. You have to make sure that it's the right temperature. It can't be too hot or too cold. So, at the stained glass company, buy a soldering iron control. Along with the soldering iron, you're going to need solder, and it comes in rolls like this. It's getting to be very pricey. This roll itself costs about $21, and depending on what kind of project you're doing, the solder either goes quick or it doesn't. It comes in various mixes. This particular one, I can't peel the price tag off, but there's 50-50, which means 50% lead and 50% tin. There's also 60-40. I recommend that you get the 50-50 because you can use it on just about every project. Next, supply that you're going to need is foil. It comes packaged like this. It's 7/32 of an inch wide. This is 36 yards of it. And there's different kinds of backing. If you can see this, the one I recommend that you get for most of your projects is the silver back. It comes also in a copper back and a black back. And that depends on the type of glass you're using and if you're going to use a patina. But for most of your projects, silver back will work. Also, as you can see, I put mine in a little dispenser. It makes it a little easier to work with. They're not very expensive, so if you see one at your glass place, go ahead and grab it. Along with soldering, we use flux. It comes in a little jar like this, and one jar lasts quite a long time because you don't use that much. Okay, you knew this was coming. You need a glass cutter. This is kind of the pencil style. There's 3 different styles that I've seen used more often than not. This is the one that I like to use because you just hold it like a pencil and roll the, there's a little wheel in the end. I know you can't see it, and that's what scores the glass. But in order to also work, it needs to have some oil on it. So this comes with a little built-in oil reservoir. And you don't have to fill it all the way full of oil, just a little bit, a little dab in there. As long as there's some in there, it goes quite a long way. The 2 other kinds of cutters I've seen are one that looks similar to this, but it has a little stem on it to kind of help you hold your hand onto it and push a little harder. And if you're still having trouble pushing down, you might want to consider the type of glass cutter that has a pistol grip on it that you can actually push down a little harder with. I'm not saying that you have to push down on the glass with all of your strength. It just has to be kind of a firm touch. Okay, the oil that was in that glass cutter comes in a jar like this. Again, 1 jar of it goes a long ways. This is the first one I've had, and it's only about half used up. You'll need a little brush to brush the flux on, and these are just pennies, but make sure you get one. Okay, this block of white material here is called ammonium chloride. This is very useful in keeping the tip of your soldering iron clean. It comes usually in a bigger block than this, and we've cut it in half, and I still haven't used the first one. This is actually the backup. Now I already showed you a pair of scissors, but these are pattern shears, and they're different from scissors because they actually cut out a strip of paper when you cut along. There's actually like 2 scissor blades here on this end and one that goes down the middle, and that'll pull a little strip of paper out between your cuts. This is used in cutting the inside parts of your pattern. So make sure you get some pattern shears. Very important item are grozers, or grozing pliers, or grozer pliers. You'll notice that they're spring loaded. This makes it easy on your hands when you use them, and right side up, you'll see when they're closed, it's kind of like a smile. While you're there, we're not going to use these on this project, but it would be a good idea to grab a pair of lead cutters. This is used for cutting lead strips if you ever plan to do leaded glass. Same thing, they're spring loaded, makes it easy on your hand, and they're quite a bit similar to a pair of wire cutters, or sometimes they're called dikes. Another little piece of plastic. This is used with the foil work that we showed you. It just costs a few pennies, but it's used to smooth out the foil after you've applied it. This item here is called running pliers. They're made to cut strips and or long cuts. If you have, let's say, a long cut in your glass, then you'll move this the glass to the edge of your table, and holding it right side up, you'll put the center of this right over that score, and as you push down, there are 2 teeth on the top and 1 tooth on the bottom, and it helps start that break that you need. While you're there, we probably won't use this on this project, but it does come in handy sometimes when you have like a stubborn push pin to just hammer it in place. It's just a rubber mallet. Well, it's got rubber on one side and plastic on the other, and sometimes you need to persuade your glass to get into where you want it to go. When you go to clean up the glass and you put flux on it, you'll need to buy some Flux Remover. And this is, you mix 50-50 with just some common dish soap. After you've cleaned it off, you're going to want to polish it, so grab a bottle of stained glass polish, and it goes quite a way. You just use a little dab of it. Lastly, if you're going to do some bigger projects or some rectangular shaped projects, you can go ahead and use those yardsticks that I've showed you before, or you can actually buy a blocking kit. And these metal pieces, you can probably see they have little holes in them that your push pins go in. And that reminds me, I got to show you push pins. These are push pins. They look quite a bit like common plastic thumbtacks, only the tops on them are made of metal. And they're made to push into your project. Now, another thing that I need to remind you is you're going to need a surface to work on. Get yourself some sheetrock. Just a piece of sheetrock is fine. It's as good as any surface to be able to push your push pins into and hold your project in place. Another item that I neglected to mention before is this is a glass square. This is made so that you can cut straight lines. You put it over the edge of your glass, and there's a ridge here that holds it straight so that you can run your cutter along and cut strips. Very useful in making borders. So get you a glass square, a small one like this, just made out of plastic, works just fine. And finally, rather than have your materials scattered all over Kingdom Come, buy yourself a toolbox. Just a cheap plastic one will work fine to store most of your items in. And say you have a friend that needs a little tiny repair on a piece that he has at his house, you can just grab your toolbox and go over there and fix it. What I'm going to do is I'm going to show you some basic techniques for cutting glass. And what I'm going to have you do before you do this is go down to your glass store and buy whatever colors of glass that you need for the project you've decided on. I'm going to do another copy of that rose along with our concept of design pattern. And I bought some green streaked glass for the leaves, and I also have some white streaked glass that I'm going to make a white rose, because I've already made a red one and a yellow one and a pink one and a blue one, believe it or not. So I'm going to make a white one this time. When you're down there, ask them if they have a small scrap of 1/8" clear glass. This is going to be your practice piece, and you can actually use this to do your concept design so that you can do it for practice.